Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon, and I am your host today. This episode of Pod Save Chocolate, as you can see from the scroll below, is brought to you by the members of TheChocolateLife.com. If you're not a member, go over there and join today. Right? I want to point out before I begin today's episode, which is on the nature of innovation, that if you are watching, no matter where you are watching, whether that's YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, that what you might do is go to the live chat replay or the live chat in YouTube or the comments in LinkedIn or Facebook and let me know where in the world you are connecting from. If you do that, I will get that up on screen and give you a shout out, say thank you very much for joining us today. And with that, let's just jump into today's episode by pointing out that this is the homepage of the Chocolate Life, right? And it's live. You can go there and click. You can go there and click on any of the stories which are currently there. There are now over 1,600 posts on the Chocolate Life, and then for every single episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, I create a post specifically for that episode, and so that you can follow along, listening to me, watching me, but you don't have to worry about what the URLs are or read the screen. You'll be the screen for the live for the live cast. What you can do is you can go read it on a device, whether it's your phone, a pad, or a computer, a tablet, or a computer. So what I want to do before I begin is ask about this question. So if you want to, go take a list of the entries at the Craft Chocolate Challenge website and tell me what you think qualifies as being innovative. Right. And so you can do that, and follow along. But if you were faced with of having to pick 3 bars from the list of 57 some odd entries, which three might you pick? Now, I'm going to say I'm not going to reveal what my choices are, right? During the course of this, there's going to be the awards episode on Tuesday, the 29th of April, so 2 weeks from today. So all of the winners will be revealed, as well as the winners of the Innovation Award will be revealed then. But I'm going to be talking about my process, my method, what it is that I'm looking for, why we should value innovation, and that's really what it is that this post talks about, is why we should value innovation. And so let me give you a little bit of history, if I can, about that, which is I have been rating and reviewing chocolate now since 2001. So it'll be almost exactly 24 years. And before then, I was working for Pierre Chouard of Vintage Chocolates, and he was the importer of Michel Cluzel and Domori. And even though my initial introduction to what we now think of as craft bean to bar chocolate, specialty chocolate is probably a better term for it, was back in 1994, it really wasn't until I started working with Pierrick and had access to the complete line of Cluzel and Domori chocolates that I really had an opportunity to start thinking about, oh, what's new, what's different, not only how am I going to evaluate this, so I need to create up with a rubric of how I'm going to evaluate the chocolate, but what constitutes new and interesting. And while there are new and interesting things about the stories, for example, Domori was founded by Gianluca Franzoni. He created this alter ego called Mac Domori, who was this adventurer down in Venezuela looking for heirloom varieties of cacao, working with the Franceschi family on the Hacienda San Jose to transplant some of these heirloom varieties. I mean, that's a very interesting story. Does it qualify as new and innovative, right? Is an interesting question. And for many, many years, people asked me in the early days of my doing this, people would ask me what's my favorite chocolate, or what do you look for in a chocolate? And I would often remark that I'm looking for something that sort of challenges my ideas about what chocolate can be like, what chocolate can taste like. And I also have to point out that as a judge of chocolate competitions, I need to be an equal opportunity chocolate fan. So I need to be able to let every entry in the competition, everything that I'm judging, have an equal opportunity to either impress or disappoint, right? No prejudging. I couldn't go in saying, ick, white chocolate is not a thing, and therefore I can't give anything made with white chocolate a good rating. I need to be open-minded to everything. So the question is, what do we mean by new and innovative? How are we going to define it? So I did a screen capture of three different of the definitions of three variations of the word innovate, which are: number one, the word innovate, which means to begin or introduce something new for the first time. Okay. Although there's a more generic version of beginning or introducing something new, and then introducing novelty or change. Okay, sometimes, so that's one way of thinking about what it means to innovate something. To innovate means to begin or introduce something new, often for the first time. All right. Then we've got the notion of innovation, which is the act of introducing something new, and the act of innovating, which is the introduction of something new, whether that's in custom, right, commercial products whatsoever, right? Which makes sense given what the definition of innovate is. And then we have innovative, which is something marked by innovation or given to making innovations, characterized by or introducing innovation, or characterized by the creation of new ideas or things. And so one way to think about that is when classifying or when thinking about when something is innovative or not, what classifies as something new, right? So, for example, you might go to, in the confectionery industry, people might say, or big candy. We'll talk about that. We use that term, big candy. A manufacturer might, for example, bring out, oh, let's take a Three Musketeers bar, for example. It's a whipped nougat bar, which is covered with a thin layer of chocolate. And then does bringing out a mint flavored version of a Three Musketeers bar count as being innovative, right? It is certainly an innovation in the sense that, oh, it's a new flavor, which has been associated with an existing, well loved product, right? But mint is a really, really common flavoring in confectionery. And so does introducing a mint flavored version of Three Musketeers count as being truly innovative? Or let's say that I substituted one form of caramel in a bar. Let's say rather than having a standard Snickers bar, that what I did is I played with the caramel, and I said that rather than it being, this kind of texture, this kind of bite and chew, and this kind of cooked level, is changing the caramel in it truly innovative? And the answer to the question is, I don't know. It would depend upon the changes that were made to the caramel. And as far as the craft chocolate community or the specialty chocolate community is concerned, I really don't think that it counts as being truly innovative. It is an innovation. They have innovated, but is it interesting? Is it meaningful? Does it change our perception of what a chocolate bar might be? And I think the answer there is no. But if you agree or disagree with me, go into the comments and let me know what you think. And we do have a comment from somebody who's watching today. I believe this is London Co. from Peace on Fifth, whom I would have met for the first time at the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival last November in Rushville, Indiana. Coincidentally or not, the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival is also organized by Dustin Cornett, who's the organizer of the Craft Chocolate Challenge. And London, I hope I have this right. Please, London, let me know if I don't get it right. If I've got it right, just thumbs up is fine. So Pierrick Chouard was one of the first chocolate makers we ever carried 15 years ago, and it was a fun way to challenge my Midwest audience and ignite this fun new adventure. I'm loving the episode's frame. And it does say London at the end. Well, thank you very much. I was not reading ahead. Yeah. So, when I think about the the world of specialty chocolate, craft chocolate in the United States. Um, and I think about some of the most influential people who are not necessarily on the maker side, because my introduction to Perique was on the importer side. So he was importing Cluizel and Domori, and that was under vintage chocolates. He then started manufacturing his own brand, Vintage Plantations chocolate, which was produced using Ecuadorian beans. Originally, it was manufactured in Ecuador. I don't know if he ever moved manufacturing operations to the United States, but the number of people who have been influenced by Perique is insane. So he had a University of Chocolate in 2001. I attended the ones in 2003 and 2005. I had the opportunity to meet John Kehoe, who's the sourcing director for Guitard. At the 2003 episode, I met Dylan Bigelow, the son of Fran Bigelow of Fran's Chocolates. In the 2003 episode, there was the sourcing director for Zingerman's Chocolate on that trip as well, somebody from the Rainforest Alliance. And then in 2005, Sean Eskenazi was on that trip and a bunch of other people. So when I think about the number of people whose um, whose journeys have been started or influenced in some way by Pierrick, absolutely London. He's one of the people who should um, be be given more recognition than he does in most circles. He's up there with John Nancy. He's up there with the original group of specialty chocolate makers: Sean Eskenazi, Patrick McClure, Alan McClure. I'm sorry, of Patrick Chocolate, Steve DeVries, Art Pollard of Amano. I mean, he is up there in terms of influence. And and I need to add, Martin Christie with 70%.com and the work I started in 2001 with Chocolat.com, all of a real influential nature at the very beginning. We were all innovating. We were bringing something new to the world of chocolate, right? And that central through line is really, really important. And then London does say he did eventually move manufacturing to New Jersey. That's what I thought, but I didn't want to say whether or not that was in fact true or not. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're watching this at some point and you can put it in the comments, or if you're a member of the Chocolate Life, you can put it on the comments of this post. I mean, did your adventure in chocolate at any point intersect that of Pierrick Chouard, and what was his influence on your journey? I think it's a really, really important one to understand. So what I want to talk about right now is that here is the list of entries for the 2025 Craft Chocolate Challenge. The link to this is in today's post, and you can follow along. And so the question becomes, how do you go about and look at this list and decide what it is that is innovative? What it is, if you're gonna give one of these bars an innovation award, what is it that you would value as a judge, right? If you're going and looking at this thing. And so again, I'm not going to tell you which three I ended up recommending. We'll do that on the episode on the 29th, although the actual results may be published a few days earlier. But let's talk a little bit about what I think might qualify, right? And I'm going to be showing some entries in the Craft Chocolate Challenge, and I'm talking about some entries or some non-entries, some bars that I picked up when I was in New York for the Salon du Chocolat. And the first place that I want to talk about is new flavors. And when I'm going to talk about new flavors, one of the things that I find interesting is a flavor that I do not normally associate with chocolate. And I think one of the really, really good examples of something that is quite innovative would be a bar from Good Now Farms, which is their caramelized onion bar, right? So okay, so number one, there is the process. I have to take the onions, I have to caramelize them, I have to dehydrate them. I'm going to use them either as a mix-in inclusion or spread them on the back of the bar. But the notion of taking a caramelized onion and mixing it in with a bar of chocolate is not straightforward. I have no idea. I haven't asked Tom or Monica what the inspiration for this was, right? But it's not something that you would normally consider to be a flavoring, either a flavoring added to the bar or as an inclusion in the bar. It's not something you would normally consider, right? And so I got to say, right off the top, that a bar like the Good Now Farms um, caramelized onion bar, right? It's polarizing. Not everybody likes it. You might say, "Ooh, this is really interesting. I don't necessarily know that I would buy it again. I'm going to go in there and maybe on special occasions purchase it." Uh, for people I know who would like this fun flavor experience, but and there, I have some people who just really, really love this bar. I was in New York for the Salon de Chocolat, and I got to spend some time with Keith Ayub, who's a regular contributor here on the Chocolate Life, and we went to Cocoa Store, and they were carrying Good Now Farms, and Keith waxed lyrical about the caramelized onion bar, in fact, recommending it to people who had walked into the store after we did. So there are people who really love this bar and who recommend it on a regular basis to people who are um, who are not necessarily that adventurous. It does require an adventurous spirit to try a bar like that, and then to be open to new ideas. And then to decide if you like it or not is another thing altogether. Like it enough to purchase it a second or third or fourth time, right? Which is another way to consider it. So that's one thing to consider. Is there is a new flavor, and so the new flavor it could be culturally relevant. So, for example, I'm in Japan, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce non-Japanese flavors into a chocolate bar. So I'm going to import flavors which a Japanese person might not recognize. Or might be familiar from American cuisine or French cuisine or some other cuisine, but putting them in chocolate represents something unusual and different. So that's another way to think about flavors and unusual flavors. And that's going to come into focus over the course of my review of the entries in the 2025 Craft Chocolate Challenge that I had to judge for innovation. Now, another area that we might consider is processes. And so, for example, when I was in New York at the Salon de Chocolat, I picked up a couple of bars from Fu Wan. There are two of them here. And I'm going to be doing an interview and tasting with um, the Warren Shu, who is the crazy mastermind of Fu Wan. And I've got two bars here. And one of them is called Taiwan Number 9 Pingtung, which is where in Taiwan the beans come from. Double ferment. So he is fermented, and the double ferment is normally some some flavor ingredient has been introduced into the pile, either during primary or secondary fermentation or during the entire thing. If you put it in primary fermentation, you may not remove it during secondary information, right? But so that is an interesting thing. Can we change the fermentation process in new ways? And by the way, is it innovative? I mean, Albertus Esquis, has a process called Tropmix, which has been around for over a decade, where he does this. Valrhona has something they call double fermented, where they do that. And so I think that if you're just incorporating um, flavorings, it has to be an interesting flavoring, right? If you're throwing bananas into the pile, maybe not. If you're throwing strawberries into the pile, maybe not. If you're throwing passion fruit into the pile, maybe not. What are some other things you might flavor the beans with during fermentation? But here's another one that Warren has done, which is he's using beer yeast to create what he calls an ale-style rough ground chocolate. Now, from my experience creating Solbesso, I understand, and my work with Ingemann, I understand just how the yeast, which is converting the sugar in the pulp into alcohol and heat during primary fermentation. People call it anaerobic and aerobic. I prefer to call it primary and secondary. So primary is the first fermentation. Secondary is anything after the first turn, right? That's secondary, where you've introduced oxygen into the pile and you've changed the chemical balance of the pile to favor bacteria, primarily acetobacter and lactobacter, over yeast in terms of how the chemical process is going to go forward. So I know that it is really, really important from my work with Solbeso to choose a specific style of yeast. If you, for example, the pH of cocoa pulp is around 3.5, around there, excuse me, and the Brix tends to be somewhere between 15 and 20%. But with that pH, you need yeasts which are very specifically tailored or um, have been cultured to be able to withstand the low pH of the fermentation. Otherwise, the acidity will kill the yeast. So it's important. But taking an ale style yeast to inoculate the pile is different from what many people are doing when they think about inoculating. So even though inoculation may not be innovative, the notion of calling out on the front label, we're using an ale style yeast, is an interesting idea. And so that represents something which is innovative. It's a process. Now, I don't know that we could say is injecting air bubbles into chocolate, right? It was innovative with the introduction of the aero bar, 15, 20 years ago. Is it innovative anymore? Oh, it's longer ago than that. Aerating chocolate, it's no longer. But you get the idea that there are processes that can be played with. Would an alternative form of tempering be innovative? The answer is yes, it might be innovative, but does it count as innovative in the context of evaluating a finished chocolate bar? Only if the tempering process resulted in something really, really unusual, right? So this is where I'm going along and thinking about innovation. Now, one thing that I pointed out from the Salon du Chocolat when I was there is I ran across this Haitian company called Ayatika, and one of the things that they had done is they had blended in an. I mean, anybody who knows me know that I love blending roasts, blending batches at every level you can to reduce differences in between batches. So if you've got 10 bags of cocoa from the same place, mix the bags. After you roast, mix the roasts, right? If you've got, different refiner runs, which might be conched slightly differently because of time and other considerations, blend them together. I'm a huge fan of blending at every single level, right? And it turns out that a lot of chocolate in the world, most of the industrial chocolate in the world, is blended, right? There might be a base of West African Amelinado Forastero, but there might be the introduction of a flavor bean. So you might have a small amount of beans or a small quantity of beans from Grenada. You're going to process them in a particular kind of way, and then you're going to add them into a base of West African Amelinado, so you get some interesting flavors that are not part of the Amelinado. So blending, right, is not necessarily innovative. Although people who also know me know I'm a huge fan of Heinz and Vera in Rotterdam. Their approach to blending is really, really cool, right? And so think about that as well. But here's Ayatika in Haiti, and what they've done is they've got a bar where they have blended Amelinado Forastero and Criollo beans from their farms. So they've set up their farms. They have distinct areas of their farms that are growing different genetics, and they have blended a typical West Africa, or these bars would have been Paraense, so they would have come probably from Pará in the state of Brazil. They wouldn't have gone from Brazil to West Africa back to Hispaniola, right? They would have gone from Pará to Hispaniola, but Amelinado with Criollos, I don't think they mention where the Criollos come from, right? But they're taking two different genetics and they're blending the genetics. And for me, this was the standout flavor. The standout bar for me at the Salon du Chocolat that I've tasted. There are a bunch of bars that I haven't tasted, but that was a standout bar. But they also did another bar where they mixed Contamina, another variety of Nacional. I'm sorry, a Forastero. Nacional is a variety of Forastero. Talk about CC and 51 genetics. So Contamina with a Melanado with guava. Now, the guava is not necessarily what's innovative here, although it's an incredibly flavorful bar here. It is, again, blending two different genetics, specifically the Contamina and Amelanado, or the Amelanado and Criollo. I mean, and the results are phenomenal. I mean, this bar from Ayatica is probably the single best bar I've ever had made from Haitian beans from a maker in Haiti, particularly. And although it's a different style, very different style from the Bonat treatment of Haitian beans, there is something very, very special about that bar. And London, if they haven't contacted you about importing this bar, you should go take a look at them, and you can email me, and I can follow up with you about this, because I think that you are Peace on Fifth is a perfect company to handle this bar. Now, in the Craft Chocolate Challenge, there were two bars from a Canadian company. They're in Magog, Quebec. The company is called Chocolat Infini, and they have two bars. Both of the bars they entered into the challenge were a blend of beans from Haiti and Belize. Now, this is a deliberate introduction of the blend of two different producing countries. And again, this is not something that is normally done. Now, they don't identify the genetics. They don't identify Amelanado and Criollo. They are talking about Haiti and Belize. But what they're doing is they're taking deliberate advantage of the flavor profile of Haitian beans and the flavor profile of Belizean beans, and they're putting together to create something which is greater than the sum of the parts. And so, again, most craft chocolate makers, most specialty chocolate makers, they don't do blending of any kind, right? And I think this is a huge mistake, right? But there are a lot of different ways that blending can be done, and producing countries is one of them. And I really, really suggest that people think about doing that, right? And I'll talk about that a little later. London gets back to me. Agreed about the specialness of this bar from Ayatica. We've been in contact with them, and we'll carry it soon. Yeah, when London, when I spoke with, his name is Jean. I recall Jean, middle name I don't get, but last name Jean again. When I spoke with him at the salon, I mentioned you specifically. I don't know if you've been in touch with them. You were in touch with them before the end of March. But if you're coming back to the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival and you have this bar, I know that it's going to be just a standout bar. I mean, just really, really wonderful. I'm looking forward to being able to use it more regularly. So there are a couple of other areas where I think innovation can be done. And I hope that some of you are going through the list of chocolates which were introduced at the Craft Chocolate Challenge, which were entered into the Craft Chocolate Challenge, and saying to yourself, hey, based on Clay, what you've been talking about, is any of these things interesting? Is any of these things innovative? And interested in knowing, put the live chat or in the comments, let me know. This is a twofer, and it's another way of thinking about this that I want to talk about. So here's a company from Thailand. They're called Siamaya. And what I have here is two different curry recipes. So one is a cow soy curry, and the other one is a coconut curry. So one is from Chiang Mai, the cow soy, and another one is a tom kha coconut curry recipe. You may know of tom kha gai, which is a coconut curry, a milk-based coconut curry soup. What we have here is a way to be able to talk about the food culture of a particular country, right? By producing variations of, when we think curry, we don't, I think that a lot of Americans, they don't think that, oh my gosh, there are there's Indian curry and there's Thai curry, and there's all these kinds of curries that are out there in the world. And curry is just a sort of generic term for a specific a flavor profile, not a specific ingredient. Just like garam masala, like there are bajillion different garam recipes for garam masala. Um, One way to think about flavoring is to think about two or more variations of the same flavor profile. Now, one of these is a 65% dark, the other one is a milk chocolate where they don't have the cocoa percentage. They're both using, Thai cocoa. Um, but what you have is an opportunity, right, to be able to taste two different versions of Thai curries, right, presented in chocolate, right? Where that works, if I can, is that when most specialty chocolate makers think about single origin, their focus on single origin is on the origin of the cocoa. So the cocoa bean. So it might be a single origin Thai. We may not know exactly where in Thailand it comes from, but it may be a blend of beans, all of which come from Thailand, still counts as single origin Thailand, right? Or we could have a single estate, which is a very, very specific farm. It could be a single region. For example, all the beans come from this Miranda state in Venezuela, or come from the Piura, which is a department in Peru, even though we don't know if they're from Chulucanas or some other place in the state of Piura. And we're not talking about a specific variety, which we think of Gran Blanco, right? But we tend to think of single origin only in terms of the cocoa that's used. And why not expand our notion of what single origin is, which is sort of what these CMI what these CMI curry bars do, which is, why don't I take a recipe which is exactly the same chocolate recipe, right? And one variation of it is going to have Madagascar bourbon, and another variation of it might have Mexican bourbon. A third variation of it might have I'm talking about vanilla, Madagascar bourbon vanilla, Mexican vanilla, and Tahitian vanilla. Right? And so I'm going to have and I could do a fourth one using tonka, which is a vanilla-like flavoring. Not legal in the United States, so be careful about that. Or I don't think the regulations has changed. But now the notion of origin is around the origin of another ingredient, right? So I could do a coffee bar, and let's talk about this. So, hey, Mike, you introduced. So this is Mike of Encore Coffee and Chocolate in Missouri, in Kansas City. He said he introduced his masala chai bar to the public last weekend at a pop-up. I was surprised how many people were aware of masala chai flavors. Not that I consider it innovative necessarily. And so, Mike, that's a really, really interesting thing to know. So where you are, which is in the middle of the United States, that Indian cuisine might not be something that many people know about, or if they do, they've got some very narrow notions of what Indian cuisine is. And they may know about chai tea, but they may not know what masala chai is compared with chai, if there is a difference. And so it could be that even though you don't think of this flavor as particularly innovative, for the audience that you're talking to, or the audience that you're selling to, it might be innovative. And so that cultural context, the market, is also something that might need to be considered. So masala chai into it wouldn't be innovative on the island of Trinidad, which has got a heavy Indian population, but it might be really innovative in Puerto Rico, for example. Right. So we need that cultural context about flavors works both way, right? It can be about importing flavors and exporting flavors, and it can also be about, what is the market? Kansas City barbecue. I mean, so doing something with barbecue in chocolate might not necessarily be innovative in Kansas City, but it could be innovative someplace else, right? Another thing to consider, but think about other ingredients. If you're doing coffee, right? If you're doing a coffee bar, Mike speaking specifically to you, having 3 different bars where the origin of the coffee is very, very different. And perhaps the genetics of the coffee are different, or the species or the processing. So doing a wet process Sumatran, which has got sort of a dark earthy funk, it would be really expensive, but a Kapi Luwak could be interesting in that context, as opposed to an Ethiopian Mocha Harar. Three different bars. The chocolate base is exactly the same. The difference is in the variety of coffee, and maybe the way the coffee is roasted. Think about, so it is the collection of bars, it is the tasting experience across the bars, which would be innovative, at least in my opinion. I first twigged on this idea. I was at the chocolate show, the Salon de Chocolat in London. I'm going to say 2015, 2016. I'd have to go look. I met a Danish chocolate maker by the name of Peter Svenningsen, who was good friends with Frizz Holm. And what Peter did, in addition to everything else, is he was a water judge. So yes, there are professional judges for bottled water. Like, of course there were. There are professional judges for bottled water. But one of the things that Peter did as a confectioner is he took the same ganache recipe using the same chocolate from Frizz Holm. And what he did is he used three different waters. So he used an extremely pure water from the Arctic, like $100 a liter. I mean, insanely. But he created a water ganache using this Arctic water. And then he did a mid-minerality water, I think it was South Africa. And then he did a really, really heavy mineral water. I think it was somewhere in Eastern Europe, right? And what you got was incredibly different presentations of the chocolate flavor, because of the way the water, right, mediated the flavors of the chocolate, even though it was exactly the same chocolate and it was exactly the same ratios. Right? You got three very different presentations of it. And so that struck me as being a hugely innovative idea. I mean, it was really, really crazy. It was a lot of fun to consider. And it's what got me thinking about that. And so if I wanted to do something with orange or citrus, there are lots of different kinds of citrus in the world, from yuzu in Japan to Valencia oranges. And then there are lots of variety of oranges from different parts of the world and species. And so you could deliver different orange flavors by processing the orange in different ways with the chocolate, right? Not necessarily thinking about, oh, how do I have to go innovate on the chocolate itself, which is really interesting. I mean, so this bar from Chocolat Infini, you'll notice it says érable in it, so it's maple flavored. It's a mixture of Haitian and Belizean beans, but the some of the flavoring is in, I don't know if you can see that, but it's in maple chunks, crystallized maple sugar chunks on the back. And so, we have a European style, very, very smooth chocolate, and we're introducing a texture. And that texture is associated with a sugar. And because of the way sugar works, I mean, it's going to hit our tongue sooner. It's going to, it's that the minerality of the maple, and the sweetness of the maple sugar, because it hit your tongue and will be dissolved by the saliva in your tongue faster than the chocolate will melt and release its aromas, you create an entirely different sensory experience. So you could have two different chocolates with two different sugars, right? So I wouldn't do beet sugar and cane sugar, but I would do very, very different kinds of sugar, maybe at different textures. And now all of a sudden, oh my gosh, that's really interesting. I might combine them in the same bar. I mean, one of the things I did many, many years ago is I did what I called a 2-in-1 bar, or 50-50 bar, where I deposited a thin layer of Guittard Orinoco, so like a 48-51% milk chocolate on the bottom. And then after it was set, I put a layer of Guittard Noir Infini. Is that what it's called, Noir Infini? No, that's a Cluizel term. They had a 90%. So whatever that 90% Guittard chocolate was. And then when you set it up, you had two different experiences of the chocolate. One of which is when the 90% chocolate is on your nose and the milk chocolate is on your tongue. And the other one is when the milk chocolate in your nose and the 90% chocolate is on your tongue. Right? So what you're doing is, if you can explain to people who are consuming this, that you've designed the bar to have two different eating experiences that provide different textures as you bite down that have different melt profiles, all right, as you chew and let the bar melt, that release the flavor in different ways. I mean, that's an interesting thing to do. And that's one of these things that this Noir Infini bar does, right? Is if you have the maple on your tongue, it's one experience. If you have maple on your nose, it's another experience. The bite and texture, right? The expression of sweetness is different. So these are the things that I'm thinking about, right? As I'm going through and I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, what is it that I'm looking for something to be innovative? Another thing. So let me know. I mean, is this if you've been looking through the list of Craft Chocolate Challenge, um, uh, any of them strike you? 2025 Craft Chocolate Challenge entry. Anything strike you? I mean, I've given one example. Any of them strike you as interesting or particularly innovative? Let me know. So Julie McClan says we did a triple explosion with 3 different experiences: dark, milk, and white, all in one bar. Yeah, absolutely. And another one, now that you said, triple explosion, is that Madre Chocolate in Hawaii did a triple bar. I forget the name of it, but it was, a chocolate, then cocoa nibs, and then I believe it also had dehydrated cacao pulp on it. And so you got the chewy cacao pulp and its texture and the straightforward sweet acidity of the pulp with the nibs. And so yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Um, these are things that you can play with. Different combinations of textures or unusual combinations of textures and flavorings, right? So you need to consider all of those things. So let's go and look. All right, so let's go and look. So we have in the dark chocolate category, we have a 65% from Sweets Escalier. Nakhon, Thailand is the origin of the cocoa, and then adding shiso leaf. So again, I'm not going to go into the details of my reviews or anything like that. Although you may be able to find out what I thought about the bar by going to Beanstalker and looking. I don't know if you can see my review specifically. Maybe you can, but you can go and take a look at it. So to an American audience, adding shiso, all right, could be interesting if you don't not very familiar with eating sushi. Shiso leaf is often included in sushi. To a Japanese audience, it's very, very straightforward. It might be unusual in chocolate, but anybody who's had experience eating straight um, um, shiso leaf is going to go, yum. This makes enormous sense. Not particularly innovative. This is an 80% chocolate with nothing added to it. So if it's just a single estate cocoa, nothing innovative about single estate cocoa. 80%, there's nothing there. This Anamatista, again, it's Nakhon, it's using the same cocoa, nothing added to it. So we're going to go through and we're going to say anything which is a straightforward dark chocolate and doesn't have any kind of flavoring added to it, probably not innovative. Right? Probably not. Well, definitely not innovative unless there is a process concern. Unless there is, oh my gosh, it's double fermented, or there's something other interested, using an unusual fermentation. I'm not going to consider it to be uh, innovative. So raspberry wine. Now that's an interesting idea. It's a fruit wine. It depends a lot about how sweet the wine is and how much maybe some barrel flavors, if barrel flavors are going to be put in there. So I think when it comes to aromatizing, most people think about aromatizing beans or nibs with a spirit like bourbon or rum or tequila. And so thinking about aromatizing the beans with a raspberry wine, really interesting idea. But I do want to note that the way the innovation awards here is done, it's not necessarily to reward very well made bars or bars that we give a high tasting score to. It's to reward interesting ideas, even when we don't think that the bar would rate a gold, silver, or bronze in any one of the main categories, which are plain and flavored dark, plain and flavored milk, plain and flavored white, and then bars with inclusions. So this one immediately struck me as potentially very, very interesting. So we have a single origin, nothing there, sugar-free, nothing there, just a straight Pura, just a straight Hacienda Victoria. We have the Chocolat Infini. it's interesting that they do identify the origin of the beans as Pisa and Maya Mountain, but that information is nowhere on the label. And so that's a shortcoming we need to take a look at. An Indian bar, a Patanemo, misspelled. So Del Cacao Chocolat, Patanoma with pink guava. Um, I don't know if there are other colors of guava, so I'd actually have to do a little bit of research on that to find out if there was some specialty associated with pink guava. So a straight Semeliki forest, right? So we've got Nova União, Mirante de Serra, Rodonia, Brazil, 81%. I think there's, in doing the research on this, there's nothing new or unusual there. We've got straightforward. Guava and lime is not necessarily innovative. I think that this is, in tasting this, there was also some chili pepper in there, which for me took this bar in an unexpected place, in a very, very nice way. All of the packaging for this bar, both Kesho entries were not production packaging, right? I love Turkish Urfa chili. So this is the Blue Spruce 72% Hacienda Victoria. I love Urfa chilies. And when I think about people putting chili in chocolate, or pepper in chocolate, black pepper, they tend towards things like ancho or Aztec or Mexican spice. So throwing in a chili from a different food culture definitely is going to make this bar stand apart. So the chili perspective is not all about innovative. The choice of an Urfa chili made this one say, "Oh, I'm gonna go take a look at this." Maple sugar as a flavoring is nothing new, right? And I wouldn't consider it. I wouldn't consider it all that different. So Georgia is connecting from Bologna in Italy. She came up to me at the Salon du Chocolat in Paris and introduced herself. She's known me for some time, apparently. And one of the things that we're looking to do, Georgia, I'm putting it out there, if anybody who's watching this is interested in doing a chocolate and food tour of Italy, probably Bologna, the area around Genoa, and the area around Turin, let me know. And we will have a local guide who's a big chocolate fan, who's also into local foods, be our guide. So let me know if something like that interests you, and we'll see about we can organize that. Then London says there is a yellow guava. There's also a white guava. All right, so I didn't know those things when I started off doing that. When I started doing my judging, I had to go and do some research, but I tend to think of pink guava as the regular guava, and so I didn't know that it needed to be differentiated from it. And I also don't know that if I had three bars, one pink guava, one white guava, and one yellow guava, and they all tasted different, but the recipes were same, I think that would be really interesting. Not necessarily just that the pink guava was the same. All right, so we have 12 milk chocolates. So we have, again, these are plain and flavored milk chocolates. So we have a company called Carabines who's doing Semolina Forest with toasted goat milk. Goat milk is not particularly innovative. A toasted goat milk could be an interesting way of doing the goat milk. We have a 62% milk. It's a high cocoa content, not stupidly high. Cajamarca, which is in Peru, from this company in Belarus. They did the raspberry wine chocolate. So I don't necessarily, is this Peruvian goat milk? Again, I don't know how, is it just Cajamarca, Peru with goat milk? It's probably the way it is, not Peruvian goat milk. But again, if I had different goat milks, that could be interesting. And bar chocolate is this Finca Belize coffee milk, right? Here we have Mike from Uncle Coffee talking about the masala chai coconut. I'm not going to go and opine on it. Mike, you're just going to have to wait until you get the judging results on that. This is just a straight milk chocolate. So one of the things I have to say about Heritage chocolate, I don't have them, but one of the things that I like about it, I don't necessarily know it's particularly innovative, but I want people chocolate makers, specialty chocolate makers, think about it, is when they can get right down to the farm level, they're mentioning Florencio Ortega, who's the owner of the farm, right, on the packaging of the bar, which I think is very, very cool. They're in the Dominican Republic. Rosemary and vanilla. right? So, I mean, interesting combination. Rosemary and chocolate, vanilla and chocolate makes sense. Rosemary and vanilla. I'm trying to think where rosemary and vanilla outside of chocolate are mixed, right? And then rosemary and chocolate, rosemary and vanilla in chocolate. Really, really cool idea. So it immediately, as I'm scrolling through this list, I'm saying, when this comes up in my judging, which I do randomly, it's something I want to pay attention to. Um, so a Dominican Republic and India bar with Tanzania nibs. Again, what we do is we have three different origins expressed differently. Tanzania nibs, which are going to provide a different flavor profile than either the DR or India nibs. So this is, again, something to think about. How do I go about thinking about that? We have this Czech company that's doing a Peru milk chocolate, a 70% chocolate with mushroom coffee as an addition. And again, this is it innovative. There are lots of people who put adaptogenic mushrooms and other kinds of inclusions and flavorings into bars. Is mushroom coffee, right? I'm not a fan of mushroom coffee. And so I have to think about this, but it is definitely thinking outside the box to think about adding mushroom coffee, which there is a huge trend. There are a lot of people who love mushroom coffee into the mix. So in the white chocolate, I got to admit, the white chocolate, um, especially white chocolate with inclusions, are my favorite categories to judge because it's where white chocolate tends not to have much of a flavor, and so it's really about a delivery vehicle for flavors. And so these are my favorite flavors to judge. This year, for one reason, we had a number of raspberries. So we have strawberries, strawberry vegan white chocolate, pineapple cream. Pineapple is not a flavor you see much in chocolate, so that was really, really interesting to consider. I mean, so if anybody is in Brazil, right, and you can find a way to get freeze dried or dehydrated jabuticaba, and you can make a white chocolate bar with jabuticaba, or if you're in Ecuador or in a Spanish-speaking country, jaboticaba. Jabuticaba is something that we don't know about here. It's like the ube bar, right? That Chalks and Boxes did when I saw them at the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival. It was like, oh my gosh! I mean, ube is such a wonderful flavor. It's so Philippine, but bringing it to an American audience is really, really quite remarkable. And so, something to consider. Ecuadorian blackberry. One of the things you need to be very careful about is that when you're thinking about these ingredients, is um, um, is how does an Ecuadorian blackberry taste different from a blackberry from someplace else? Right? Now, again, if I had an Ecuadorian blackberry with a blackberry that was grown in Oregon, right, and there were identifiable differences between the two of those things, this would be interesting, right? But Ecuadorian blackberry, while it might be a really good blackberry, in and of itself, it's really, really hard to tell what is going on. It's like the pink guava without identifying how pink guava is different from yellow guava and white guava. It's maybe interesting, but maybe not. Let's go. So, Julie, I'm suggesting you want to know how to spell jabuticaba. It's Jabuti, Jabu Ticaba, Jabuti, yeah, Jabuticaba. And if you want to do it in Spanish, just replace the U with an O, Jabuticaba. So every time I go back to Brazil, I head straight to a market and I'll see if I can find fresh jabuticaba. Jabuticaba jam, jabuticaba jelly, absolutely insane. Um, so I would like to taste some of that bars. Where can I find them? I've never heard of most of them. So Georgia, part of the problem, part of the challenge you have is that you are in Italy, and many of these companies don't export to Italy. So if you wanted to, for example, get the bars from Sweets Escalier, you'd need to bring them in directly from Japan. No one in the United States is importing and selling these bars. What you might do is you might reach out to the High Five company in Amsterdam and saying, consider importing some of these bars, as many of them as you can, or right, find somebody who would do it for you. that would be the best way to go think about doing it. Here are all these bars that are interesting. Why don't you go about doing it? Or if you can go like to Cocoa Runners in the UK, I know they ship to the EU. It's a challenge now, Brexit. Um, but see how many of these bars that they carry. So you're going to want to look for a local importer distributor. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're going to each individual website and shipping directly, which is going to be hugely expensive. Right. So there's that. Um, London Co. is saying, we sold out of the ube bar the very day we got it in stock. Yes, it was one of my, I'm going to say one of my two favorite bars at the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival. The other one would have been Tandy Peterson's Elote bar. Right, number one, just textural and flavor, just really really fun, really really different. Also, ube is this wonderful purple color, so it's an unusual flavor, no added coloring in a chocolate. So um, Ecuadorian blackberries probably more. Yeah, I get that about that naming, James. Thank you very much for pointing that out for people. But what I want to do is I'm not as much interested in the name. So the difference between the English and the Spanish of it, I want to know if there is a specific flavor difference that can be attributed to Ecuadorian, right, as opposed to American grown blackberries, right? So because all I can say is, oh, this is an interesting blackberry chocolate, and do I attribute it? I don't know why Ecuadorian is different. And so that is an interesting aspect of when you're trying to innovate around an unusual flavor. I mean, if you were to say jabuticaba, nobody knows, in almost, if you're not from Brazil, haven't been to Brazil, and even if you've been to Brazil, you may never have tasted anything made with jabuticaba. Um, it's going to be new, it's going to be interesting, and you don't have a flavor referent for it. It sort of looks like a big grape and it has seeds in it, but it's not. It's like tropical grapes. Take, just your generic idea of what tropical flavor is. So it's not passion fruit and it's not guava and it's not papaya, but it's sort of like this mix. It's not pineapple. It's got all this wonderful fruity acidity, but you're going and it looks like a grape, but it doesn't taste anything like a Concord grape or any other kind of grape you've had. Insane, right? So it has to be really, really different. I mean, this pineapple cream, it's interesting because we don't normally think of pineapple in chocolate. And so it was really, really interesting to consider. If I were doing this again, I want to have maybe some dehydrated pineapple, or maybe what I might do is I might roast some of the pineapple, so I got roasty flavors in there, and just add some depth and complexity and other things to do with the pineapple. I mean, it was an extremely well made bar. If you don't know Thor's, they're in southeastern Idaho. It's founded by a doctor. The pineapple, if you like flavored white chocolate bars, I would recommend go taking a look at it, because if you've never had pineapple in a chocolate bar, go have pineapple in a chocolate bar. It makes an enormous sense. And so, I mean, this is it when we're talking about when we're talking about introducing just plain fruit flavors. Okay, so James comes back. More is more sour than a typical North American blackberry. We've done chocolates with it, and it's delicious. Oh, James, I got to say that this chocolate from Blue Spruce, an Ecuadorian blackberry, it was delicious, right? But that sourness, which is associated with a different pH, I've run across very sour blackberries before and very, very sweet blackberry before. And so, we also have other kinds of blackberry-like um, crosses, especially in Oregon. So again, I would I would want some sort of description of this, which said this is why Ecuadorian blackberry um, is different. Oh, interesting. From Dionysia, by the way. Um, oh, interesting. Okay, gotcha. Thank you very much for letting me know. It wasn't one of the entries, although Dionysia was somebody who did enter this year's Craft Chocolate Challenge. James, thank you very much for letting me know that. I appreciate the level of information. So the inclusions category is, again, my single favorite. My single favorite. Um, and I want to talk about a couple of things. So this bar from Soothies. So they're from Andhra Pradesh in India, dark chocolate bar with figs and cheese. I got to say, figs and cheese, I think that's a brilliant idea. Figs and cheese and chocolate, brilliant idea. And so I love the idea. Unfortunately, it was freeze dried figs and freeze dried cheese. And so it didn't work. And so even though it was innovative in terms of, oh, figs and cheese and chocolate, that I really, really love, right? Um, I would normally consider it to be an innovative idea. Um, the only thing I didn't vote this as being innovative because the choice of vehicle, freeze-dried figs and freeze-dried cheese, um, didn't make it work. I could recognize that it was a really, really interesting idea without um, without saying it's innovative. If they had chosen dehydrated figs and some other way of incorporating the cheese, um, that would have been, I think, it would have been um, it would have shot to the list of consideration for being innovative. One of the things that we did find, there were actually two different versions of this, is new and innovative. How do we take a flavor combination, which we find in another aspect of cuisine, right, and bring it into chocolate? And so, a company called Chocaiko, they're in Connecticut, took the flavorings which is associated with a Negroni bar, right, or with a Negroni cocktail, sorry, with a Negroni cocktail, and created a chocolate bar from them. And what I can say is that um, number one, Negroni, my favorite cocktail in the world, done really, really well. And the idea of taking the flavors associated with a Negroni bar, putting them into an entirely different context, which is a chocolate bar, and taking a Negroni cocktail and put it into a different context, right? And then using orange um, in a couple of different ways. They actually used a Negroni cocktail. They infused the nibs in a Negroni and then added orange peel. Something to consider. Is how do we take something which is really common and put it in an entirely new context? Down Low did a bar which was another cocktail bar, which was again taking whiskey and orange. And I got to say, what was really interesting about this for me, because I took a look at the ingredients, is not only does it have dehydrated orange peel, but it has orange oil, cherry oil. They infused the nibs with bourbon, and that added cherry bitters and orange bitters. And so, what's interesting here is not just, oh, we aromatized the nibs in bourbon. What we did is we took a cocktail, I believe it's a cocktail, the Real McCoy. If it's not, it's a good name for it, but it's 20 slang for the genuine article. But what they did is they introduced the flavorings using lots of different variations of the flavorings. So again, orange peel, orange oil, and orange bitters, cherry oil and cherry bitters. I mean, that way of taking the flavors, the complexity, and doing a lot with them, and also the texture of the orange peel provided some interesting notes to it. Finally, another American maker. This is Carabines. They're from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Um, they did a bar which combined passion fruit, orange, and guava, and so number one, it's three different tropical fruits you don't normally, or orange, citrus fruit, you don't normally consider together, but the guava was in there with in candied form, so there was a texture to it. So we get an unusual mix of flavors with an unusual mix of textures with the candied guava, which was a fun way of taking a familiar trope, right, and standing on his head and doing something quite interesting with it. Finally, last point from Georgia Martone: shipping from the UK is impossible right now, and High Five doesn't have a similar selection. Then, unfortunately, Georgia, you're going to need, if there's an Italian bean to bar chocolate association, or maybe somebody in France, or somebody in Germany. Maybe what you can do is you can talk with the members of the association and do a group buy, right? Might be something to do. Um, you might be able to talk to, I mean, look for a distributor here in the United States who's carrying many of these things. But one of the things about the entries in the Craft Chocolate Challenge is that many of these do not have distribution, right? And that's one of the reasons why they're in the Craft Chocolate Challenge, as opposed to, although many of them have won international awards, they're not necessarily, in the International Chocolate Awards. The idea is to come to the Craft Chocolate Challenge because it's a welcoming place. You're going to get lots of feedback from the judges. You're going to be able to iterate on your packaging. You'll be able to iterate on your flavoring based on what it is that the judges say, and then make your product ready to join a different awards program in a future year. Lots of really, really fun things to do here. This Genmai cha was an inclusion on the back of a matcha flavored white chocolate. So lots of interesting things to do here. But again, when you're thinking about introducing these flavors that are recognizable, what is going to be interesting for a judge is, how do you provide complexity to them? If it's just a single note, then it's going to be a challenge to think of them as. So we might say that this Ecuadorian blackberry white chocolate bar ran, topped the list of what we liked in the white chocolate category. Not particularly innovative when we think about some of these other things. If there was some dehydrated blackberry in there, if there was something else in there which would have punched it up. I mean, one of the things which is interesting about this Carabines bar is not only is there passion fruit, orange, and guava in it, but there's citric acid. And so I'm guessing maybe that citric acid was included probably with the guava chunks to make them pop. Um, consider that, and then consider the format. Again, this bar from Soothies, which had figs and cheese in it, great concept. Freeze dried was not the way to go. Right? So that's it. I mean, another thing to take advantage of and to consider. All right, are they innovative on their own? Not necessarily. This is a bar from Baiani in Brazil. I'm going to be having Tuta and Juliana as guests in an interview tasting pretty soon. But what they do is they've got a vintage series, right? And unfortunately, they don't say what the year of vintage is on the front or the back. But there's also a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the farm, which is now called the Valley Potomuju. Before then, I forget what the name was. But the combination of vintaging and a 50th anniversary, right, is calling attention to what it is that's going on, right, in a way that says, ooh, this is a unique and new combination of things to consider when you're putting together chocolate. So if you have anything special like that, right, that you can point to on the outside of your packaging. So it's a vintaged, the year of vintaging, I think this might be 2018. The harvest for this. And then it's also, this year is celebrating the 50th anniversary. Put those things on the package, put it out there, letting people know this is unique, this is new, it's different, it's limited edition, right? It's a way to call attention to what you're doing in a way that is not common, and a way that will catch people's attention. And so that's a look at innovation, right? And the nature of innovation from my perspective as a judge in the Craft Chocolate Challenge. This is what I'm looking for, right? When I want to consider something as innovative, right? I want it to challenge my ideas, again, of what's in chocolate. Again, the goal of this is not necessarily to reward extremely well-made bars. It's to reward bars that might not rise to the level of winning in their individual categories, right? But sometimes it is a very well-made bar and it rises to winning an award. And you can see that if you go to the top of this page on the Craft Chocolate Challenge website, and you go to the season 3 listing, what you'll do is you can see if there's any overlap. So here's the innovation category: Aki, Choco Forest, Smoked Dark Chocolate. their Nagano 60% dark milk. So did we find that the Aki Serenity did not win in any of the main awards categories. And it turns out it looks like there's no overlap between the innovation categories and the awards last year. We'll see how that works this year. I mean, I'm just one of 9 judges, and so I'm only responsible for a very, very small percentage of what gets awarded. I mean, my input is only 11% of what's going on, and without going into specific details about bars and how I rated them and all that kind of stuff. What I wanted to do is I wanted to focus on what I found interesting about the bars and what might be considered to be what I considered to be innovative about the bars. And so you as a craft chocolate maker or a specialty chocolate maker going forward, right, working with inclusions especially, right, is going to reduce is one way to reduce product costs because it's not chocolate, and cocoa butter and cocoa beans and cocoa butter are really, really, really expensive right now. And so finding other things that you can add to the chocolate that are less expensive, right, is going to be is going to reduce your cost of goods. So that's a good thing all the way around, right? It's a question of what those things are that you're going to add to the chocolate. So yeah, there's always going to be there's always going to be interested in still yet another 80% chuncho from Peru, right? Not innovative at all, right? And you have the question of what are you doing to those chuncho beans that is different from everybody else that is using those chuncho beans, right? When you think about innovation, right, what you can do is you say, here's what I can do that is different from what everyone else is doing, right? And it is that differentiation, I think, which is the main reason I believe to forget, right, what a chocolate bar is, right? To forget the notion that because I am a bean to bar chocolate maker, I can only make bars, right? And the only thing it can contain is cocoa beans and sugar, or cocoa beans, sugar, and cocoa butter, right? Go and take a look at all of the different food traditions that are out there, right? Just think different, right? I mean, one way to do this is to take an existing chocolate and then grade it over other things, grade it over other flavorings. Does it make sense at all? Right? Again, I don't know if it was Tom or Monica Rogan who thought of the caramelized onion chocolate, or if it was somebody else entirely in their universe, but non-intuitive and really interesting. There's a guy by the name of David Chocolato de David, David Briggs, in Portland. I don't still he's got business, but once a year he'd do a pig's blood ganache. Right? Is it innovative? Well, yeah, it's pretty interesting. We don't often find putting blood sausage and things like that. That's not necessarily innovative, but combining that with chocolate is certainly new, certainly different. But it's worthy of attention. It grabs people's attention. Think about innovation as a way to grab people's attention. They're going to be curious to want to try it. It could also be limited edition, which means if you don't get it now, you're not going to be able to get it for another year. This is the reason to go and think about really interesting flavor and texture combinations, and think about food traditions from other countries, right? And add them to your repertoire of the chocolate bars that you're making, and then double down on flavor. When I'm thinking about this bar from Down Low, right? And we think about the orange that's in the bar. It's not just orange peel, so which in addition to imparting a flavor also imparts a texture, right? But they've added orange oil and orange bitters, right? And so they've got 3 different expressions of the flavor of orange in the bar. And what that does is it delivers, right, an expression of orange flavor, which is different from just biting into an orange. And this is something I've mentioned this before, but think about this. There are 3 solvents that you can use to extract flavors, right? So one of which is oil, one of which is alcohol, and one of which is water. So you could take a cinnamon stick, do an extract of cinnamon and water, do an extract of cinnamon and oil, do an extract of cinnamon and alcohol, and then emulsify them, right? If you're using sunflower lecithin, you could emulsify them and add them to a bar of chocolate. And now what you've got is an expression of cinnamon, which is expanded. It's got more nuance, more subtlety. Uh, it's got a different flavor profile from any cinnamon, because in your mouth you've got these flavors of saliva breaking them down. Strecker reactions, I think they're called. I know. Uh, uh, I'm sorry if I didn't get um, that done properly, but you don't have any way of getting sort of the alcohol extraction or the oil extraction in your mouth. And by doing that in advance and then incorporating it, you can do that. Or maybe you just take a Ceylon cinnamon, um, and another form of cinnamon, and you do two different bars with two different cinnamons. Or you could take two different powdered cinnamons and put them together, right, and do it. There's all sorts of ways of thinking about this innovation with flavor, even if you're using very, very common flavors, right, and do something which is unusual, right? And that's what we're looking for. As a judge, when I'm looking for things that are innovative, things that are in the inclusions category, whether it's a dark chocolate inclusion, a milk chocolate inclusion, or a white chocolate inclusion, I mean, this, it's something really to consider, right? Um, as you go forward, and let's also fund. This is the carabines bar. This is the guava passion fruit lime bar, but the front of the bar is swirled one way, and the back of the bar is swirled another way, right? And so we can innovate on the presentation of the bar itself, right? The way I'm incorporating two different chocolates. I mean, Fuwan is doing something like that. They've got their spring and Austronesia bar, and it's got two different chocolates, from 70% honey fermented dark chocolate and a 38% Alianthus ash green chocolate. I haven't opened the bar up. I don't know what it actually looks like. But don't forget to think about the presentation of the bar. And with that, we're over time. I want to thank everybody who participated today. I want to remind everybody that this episode, although it's been scrolling the entire time, that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is in fact sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. If you're not a member, you can go over, click on this green button. If you're not logged in, it will say join, and you can join as a free member. There's been a free membership level since I started the Chocolate Life in 2008. And but if you have the resources and can support the work that I'm doing, or you're a chocolate maker and you want one-on-one sessions with me to be able to provide consulting expertise about your chocolate, there's a special offer in April that's going to be posted on the Chocolate Life sometime later today, and it will be in the monthly member newsletter as well. So I do want to remind everybody that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is sponsored by the members, and I really do appreciate it, as well as the great comments from the people who are listening. London, thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed the session. And with that, I'm going to make one or two final notes, one of which is that the episode on the 29th of April is going to be the Craft Chocolate Challenge Awards episode. I'm having an interview tasting with Ali Gower of Chocolatry in Scotland, which is going to be on the 9th of May. You can do that. And I'm going to be scheduling the interview tastings with the makers whose bars I picked up at the Salon de Chocolat over the course of the next couple of weeks and months. So stay tuned to those. And one way to stay tuned is to become a member of the Chocolate Life. You'll get the newsletters. And if you're a premium member, every time there's an episode of Pod Save Chocolate, I send you the post when it goes live. And with that, that's the end for today. I've gone way over time, but I do want to thank everybody for joining me today. And to remind everybody, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, maybe you're doing it wrong. And so until the next time, everybody, ciao.